Even after the sequel trilogy, Star Wars fans were willing to give The Mandalorian a second chance, and in its second season, with its premiere, it pulled in 4 times the audience that The Acolyte had for its premiere. But folks, we're here to tell you that things are looking very different indeed, because The Mandalorian continued to grow and grow, and with The Acolyte, fans just said no and no. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel that is bringing Hollyweird back to the mainstream middle where money can be made. Yes, they're kicking and screaming. But folks, we are here deeming The Acolyte to be an absolute abject failure, and we're going to show you the data that proves it. Why? Because we don't believe in leaving you out in the dark the way the mainstream media is, as they are desperate to try to contain the level of catastrophe that The Acolyte and Star Wars have become. Folks, get ready. Let's bring the panel in right now. We need to get straight to what is happening here, and that is that Nielsen has brought out the statistics we've all been waiting for when it comes to The Acolyte. And no, it's not all right. The media narrative is being utterly destroyed. The claims of those who said that The Acolyte was doing well, that it was just a bunch of haters, that it was a bunch of Russian bots and trolls. Well, they are desperately, terribly wrong, and we'll be covering that as we go along, folks. The Last Jedi strategy cleanup is already underway. They've started now censoring Rotten Tomatoes. We're seeing also other platforms that are not even directly linked to Star Wars or The Acolyte, but they're like, okay, well, this is the chance to do what we got to do because Rotten Tomatoes is going to take some more of those negative headlines. So Crunchyroll, he's removing the ability to do comments. So a lot of these platforms are using this opportunity, but here's why. It's because the backlash is real. It's having a real effect, and that's going to have an impact on not just Lucasfilm, not just Kathleen Kennedy, not just Leslie Headland, but the broader Disney stock feeling. Take a look at this. Nielsen charts out now for June 3rd through June 9th. This is the first time we're going to get a look at how The Acolyte performed. And everything about The Acolyte has been set up to make it do well on Nielsen. Everything, including its release date, including the runtime, the 2 episodes coming out on the same night, everything was set up to do as much as they could to make this look good. Now, let's just see what it looks like to do well, okay? So if we take a look at what it looks like to do well, Nielsen shows us Your Honor on Netflix and Paramount Plus is pulling 1,500 million minutes. For those of you who know what math is, 1.5 billion is the number there. Bluey, Disney Plus, 1.1 billion. Grey's Anatomy, 1 billion. And it continues right on down. You'll notice, folks.
I wonder if Bluey will be including all of the extra materials that are on there now, because they're classifying on the platform Bluey minisodes as a separate show.
That's an interesting point. I have not thought of that. I will say that it's interesting to me that Bluey is the antithesis of everything that Disney stands for today. Disney doesn't own Bluey. Disney just licenses Bluey, and yet Bluey is defeating Disney. It may give Disney some pause, but I doubt it. Bluey has paws, though. They're a dog family. All right, but where can we find The Acolyte? Where
the
can we
pause that
find
refreshes.
it? That's right.
Don't see it.
The Acolyte is not here. It's
What
not
is it?
beating Bridgerton. It's not beating Young Sheldon. It's not beating Sweet Tooth. Folks, we live in a world where a Star Wars live-action show released to the world, and it did not beat something called Sweet Tooth. That's the world we live in. So where do we find it? Well, we have to go to the original content, a subcategory. And when we do that, we find down here at the number 7 spot in a subcategory with only 488 million minutes watched. And that's for 2 episodes. And it's for a full week of 2 episodes.
At least we can see there that The Acolyte is more popular than a certain individual of German origin.
Well, they're not so different.
But wait. It's sandwiched between Dancing for the Devil and said person of
not the devil, but a certain other German individual, yes.
It's
where
where
people will take the devil over The Acolyte, though.
They're keeping appropriate company.
Is the meat in the devil's sandwich here?
Yeah,
it's like the devil
There
kind
is
of
something
thing.
to be said for people actually appreciating that evil exists, and there should be a light shined on it. There's not much evil or good in The Acolyte right now. Also going to point out,
was he Austrian? I apologize.
Evil's more popular than the
Yes, he was.
I mean, technically,
he was
Napoleon
Argentine. You could check it.
French. The thing I want to point out is obviously top of the list is Your Honor, which is a Showtime show, which I don't think it did so well in the ratings, but now they stick it on Netflix and it's rocking the ratings. So
yeah, I've actually seen it. It is really good.
Speaking of things that are rocking the ratings, over there from That Game Place, we need to add to the panel Mr. Spencer Bakuli.
It's me. What's going on, everybody?
He's the problem.
Hey, Spencer. You know what's even funnier is you got Evil Geek Girl dancing for the devil there.
Yeah, it's lined up perfectly. It's lined up perfectly. So let's put this into comparison, though, and then we're going to talk about where the media is going to go with their spin machine next. Remember, we were just told last week that The Acolyte was the second most popular Star Wars show to ever grace the small screen of Disney+. It was the second most popular. So let's find out what reality now says. And by the way, I think one thing we can definitely say is that little company called Luminate that has been putting out these ratings ahead of Nielsen, they're on the money. And I'm not sure how that's going to impact Nielsen, but very interesting now that Nielsen has competition that seems to line up with them. That's not been the case in the past. Samba TV often disagreeing with Nielsen. We tend to defer to Nielsen. But if there's now the Luminate coming out way ahead of schedule and giving us this data on Variety, that's going to be an interesting thing to watch and take note of inside the entertainment industry. A little bit in the weeds, but look at this, folks. Ahsoka going in the Wayback Machine, not too far back, but Katie Campion here from Deadline. Ahsoka debuts at number 2 among Nielsen's streaming originals. Suits still going atop overall list. So let's remember that back when Ahsoka came out, and Ahsoka was a failure, Ahsoka came out into the number 2 spot of that subcategory and placed itself in the top 10. It was number 5, in fact, in the top 10. And how did it do so? Well, take a look at this, folks. With just under a week of viewing, the episodes tallied 829 million minutes watched. What this says is that approximately half of the audience for Star Wars is gone. And that is not good for Kathleen Kennedy. Spencer, let me hand you the mic first off in this conversation. Yeah. We're saying bye-bye now to Kathleen Kennedy and her prowess. She's still at Lucasfilm, but she rules over a studio with no viewership. I mean, going from one show to the next and cutting your audience in half from debut to debut is just terrible. What do you make of this? Is it over now?
Honestly, what I make of this is it's not over. It will never be over because Star Wars is such a big brand. But what I think this shows is that the audience that's left is very, very minuscule, and it's not like going to lead to success. Like at this point, the Acolyte's core audience are the diehard Disney shills and like the Raylos. And clearly they're tuning in, but nobody else is. Like outside of our circles, I've heard nobody talk about the Acolyte. Like no normies, no general other like media podcasts or anything. Like nobody is watching this. So that's what I think we're looking at here is that it's the end of it. You know, Lucasfilm's gamble was successful. They bet on, we'll have all these new fans, a new generation of Star Wars. We don't need the old ones. And that's where they're at now. That's their core audience are the 5 million people who are left. That's generous. 5 million, just the small amount of people who just want to tune in every day to ship Kimmer or however you pronounce his name.
Oh, what's funny is I told somebody what I do every Tuesday night, and they're not aware of the channel, and I said that we do a review of the show pretty much every time. Oh, are you liking it? And I said, no, not really.
Not particularly.
And they said, and they actually asked me, well, what don't you like about it? Because we're enjoying it. And I got in this odd situation where I have a policy of if someone likes something, unless there's a really good reason, I am not going to try to convince them to dislike something.
Why did they like it, Jonas?
Well, that's the other thing.
That's what I would have flipped. I would have interrogated them and been like, well, what do you like about it?
The only thing of course, I asked. Sorry, I basically I kind of got out of the conversation by saying I'm not a big fan of the lesbian space witches, and they were like, was that in there? I'm like, okay, this explains it to me. The two of them are sitting there on their phones while it's on the TV,
and then they like lift their head up when they hear like a lightsaber ignite. So they've seen 4 or 5 cool visuals and they go, oh, it's not bad. That's pretty cool.
Oh, cool. They're using it as a flashlight. Get back on my phone.
But if they watch it with that casual amount of attention, that's how they watch Ahsoka, and that's how they watch Suits or anything else. That's just who they are.
That's
the other
true.
thing the other thing is one of the reasons why they don't like people like us and the true fans of these things is because they want to be able to enjoy something that is bad without having to feel bad, right? Because they don't want to see Star Wars. They want to see shipper crap, which is exactly what this is. Because that's the only audience this has. This is the Raylos, basically.
This is the kind of thing that, with an appropriate budget, could work on the CW. Although it's a
YA novel, basically, is what they tried to make happen.
Right. And I think that a lot of those CW shows probably had a little bit of defense in that no one was watching them, and they supposedly kept the budgets in line. If this was just something that was out there and nobody was watching it, I don't think anyone would hate it nearly as much if it didn't have the name Star Wars attached. Well, Leslie Headland and Amanda aren't doing us any favors there.
Jonas, those CW producers are crying in their beer saying, if we only had budgets like that, my God, because they've got nothing close.
Well, we're going to come back, by the way, we'll come back to the Raylo and the shipping thing and how bad it is. We've got a story actually on that. It's terrible. It's atrocious. Not quite as bad as the ratings. Ron, I want to get your take in just a second, but folks, take a look. This is lining up with Luminate. What does that mean? Well, it means that in the third episode, which we'll get the Nielsen numbers next week, we expect there to be a bump. And then we expect this thing to fall off a cliff. Luminate is telling us that this sucker's running at like 200 million minutes watched. That means it will drop off the Nielsen charts with expediency. And we're going to be sitting here talking about a show that is not even sufficient. It's not even popular enough for people to have the data up. It's irrelevant outside of the story that is Star Wars as a franchise has collapsed. That's the story. This series, the content inside of it is not, unless you're looking at it to see, well, how did the train derail? Ron?
Well, here's the thing. As I'll call myself a Star Wars dad, right? So in the early 2000s, when the prequel trilogy was happening, I was very into Star Wars because it was very cool for me as a Star Wars fan from the original trilogy to now have sons that I could pass this stuff on to. And they were showing the Jedi when they were prominent. Like one of the things that I thought was so cool in Attack of the Clones, which I know is not necessarily the best movie, but when all the Jedi were out there in the stadium and they all lit up their lightsabers together, and then the droids started attacking them, and they had the first battle, right? The Jedi and the droids, and then the clones. Yoda brought the clones in. I mean, to me, as a dad, being able to share that with my young sons at the time was so freaking cool. And I think that, like a lot of dads like me, Disney has lost us, and we're not passing this on to the next generation anymore. So, one of my sons, my stepson, he's in his 30s now, and then I have a 22-year-old son. But my 11-year-old son doesn't care about Star Wars because I don't care about Star Wars anymore, which is a huge future audience that's gone, that they've eliminated. Because if I don't care, why am I going to pass it on to my sons or daughters if I had any? But so like if they've lost me, they've lost them, and to me, that's millions upon millions upon millions of people that they've lost.
And
this.
Who are they replacing them with? People who will never have sons and daughters to pass it on to.
Well, they're replacing them with the Bridgerton audience that never moved on over and watched this. But you're right. It's no longer a multi-generational franchise. It's no longer an evergreen franchise. And it was the biggest franchise on the planet. And so we've been covering this. But I think it also needs to be said that the media gaslighting now comes to an end. Now, that's not to say that they're completely going to give up. They're going to slither into their escape narrative, right? They've got to get the escape hatch. And let me show this to everybody. This comes to us from Mac, at Now It's Known. Mac's such a tremendous resource for us. But I'm telling you, folks, this is what they're going to use as their get out of jail free card. Take a look at this, okay? What they're going to claim is that the Acolyte has a shorter total runtime. And that because of that, that's where the percentage drop is coming from. They're going to ignore the fact that it's been cut in half. And they're just going to say, well, this is apples to oranges. The total runtime for The Acolyte is 78 minutes. Andor was 117 minutes. Ahsoka was 97 minutes. It's not fair. It's not fair. That's what they're going to say. This is where they're going to take this next. I don't think it's going to work because I don't think they can engineer the headlines away from this. Does anybody have any thought on where the media might try to
Here's
get
the
out of
problem
this?
with that comparison. You put these next to each other, and what you see is that the one thing they could blame is, well, people didn't like Ahsoka. They gave up the service. It's because the question is not what was the various runtime. The question is, what was the field of viewers from which they could draw, i.e. memberships in Disney Plus, which we know are plummeting because of these shows being so bad. Half the people who watched Ahsoka quit, maybe more, and are never even there to watch this. And when they hear from their friends what this is like, they say, well, I sure made the right decision. You know, it's not a vacuum. It's not Netflix and Amazon and everybody else are not drawing from the same pool of people. So
Well, I think, and
when
more
they win
broadly-
with a larger possible choice, it's bigger.
And more broadly, we're watching in real time today, folks, watching here in the show, the Disney stock crashing. And this isn't despite of Inside Out 2. We're going to talk about that later. But
Yeah,
I think we've
good
come to the
point.
point now where Star Wars, its failure has metastasized all across this company. We've been talking about on the Patreon and on X, I've been talking about the crowd levels at Walt Disney World and specifically the water parks, because that's where they can't hide it anymore. We're going to talk about that more, but note that we are back in that same cycle of Nelson Peltz getting out and the stock going down. And if this thing continues doing what it's doing, it's not going to matter if it's Nelson Peltz who comes back for a hostile takeover. You're going to find somebody who's going to have had enough of this. Bob Iger's supposed to be driving the stock up, not sending people on a roller coaster of up and downs with more downs than ups. This is a company that was at $200 under Bob Chapek. Let that settle in. That is what they are facing. That is why the Acolyte is not on an island. All right, anybody with final thoughts on the Acolyte before we wrap up this one? We're going to come back to the Acolyte because Leslie Headland is out there claiming that having Smilo Ren naked in the water was absolutely artistically necessary. In fact, you could not tell the story any other way. So we'll come back to that, folks. Don't worry. It's an embarrassment, but we'll talk about it. Panel, any other thoughts on the Acolyte before we kick it on off of the screen for the time being?
Stop.
Well, I have a
That's a
final
6%
thought
drop right
when
there.
it comes to the Acolyte. Actually,
Before it.
let's put it this way: as someone who the Bridgerton audience is catered to, and yes, I have watched Bridgerton, although this past season is freaking awful. There's nothing wrong with shipping in and of itself when you have a greater story to go with that. And
Yeah,
that's
Jim and
the
Pam-
thing
Jim
with
and
the
Pam worked.
Acolyte. Which one? Sorry.
Jim and Pam on The Office, were a huge part of that show working.
Exactly. It worked. The crux of the issue with the Acolyte is there's nothing really rooted in the Star Wars that normies are invested in. Okay. Original Star Wars
You went too far.
did
there,
have
Lorena.
shipping
you
in
could
it.
have just
You
stopped
had,
and said there's nothing.
I could, but let's face it, I like to shore up my case every time I put this stuff out there. That is true. But it's supposedly geared to me. It's supposedly geared to, I'm a female, obviously, I'm a minority. The show sucks. And as a Star Wars normie, there's nothing really that I can latch onto. So I'm out, which is why I stopped watching, I think like last week, and I canceled my Disney Plus.
I'm not even sure
I'm
you're
gonna,
legally
I'm
allowed to
gonna
say
agree
that,
with
Lorena.
you,
I'm
and
gonna,
I'm gonna add this to this. Okay, so the other day I was in the car, and I don't know why I just turned on the Star Wars soundtrack, and thinking about these amazing themes, and we can't play them right now because YouTube and Disney would destroy this channel if we did it. But you think
They're
about
watching us like
you
hawks.
can go through. almost any single track from that has a sense of wonder, has a sense of mystery. The Cantina Band has a sense of fun. You just go through all of the emotional breadth that is in that Binary Suns thing as Luke is looking off into the sky and dreaming about someone that he could be. And then, of course, Rian Johnson gets to steal that and have the little broom boy at the end of Last Jedi. So even in that moment, you have something amazing in the background of these sequels that are not great, in my opinion, but they still have John Williams soundtrack in it. Like The Acolyte has nothing that even comes close to an actual clear emotion on screen. They're not pushing you in any specific direction. The most clear emotion they have is that ridiculous scene that I don't want to bring up the meme, the power of one, the power of two, the power of matter, or whatever it is. It's just it's this bland, it's unseasoned yogurt, this show, and trying to market it as Star Wars is the dumbest thing, because guess what? People remember what Star Wars was like.
And
they spent $200 million to basically tell us that girls like the bad boy. That's really all it was.
Right, the one who just murdered everybody they ever did.
Not this one.
15 minutes ago.
Jonas, with all respect to John Williams, he's writing to a story that has those things in it to begin with: the fun, the hope, if you don't have the core, all the music in the world ain't going to save it.
Well,
so,
this show deserves somebody sitting on a piano and hitting middle C 100 times in repetition. That's the level of composure this requires.
Quote Peter Venkman, they hate this.
And folks, we have come to the end yet again, but where the end is, the beginning is on the way. Don't worry, folks, 3 more videos a day, every single day, right here on the Pro Channel. You can help us out by clicking the like button, share, subscribe, click it, stick it to the algorithms, it's the notification bell. Drop a comment right on down below, let us know your thoughts, and folks, don't forget, we will see you very soon. In the meantime, folks, keep learning, keep growing, and as always, keep having fun.